as a lay member. I was on a committee 2 years ago, or several large groups developing the mental health strategy for Nottingham. So it's really good to be here this afternoon to see how that sort of big group meeting to look at things changing is now translating into real change on the ground in the south of the county. So you're very welcome. It's going to be a really interesting couple of hours, quite action-packed, I expect. You've got a big chunky section towards the middle and end where we're going to have some interactive discussion groups to which I think you've already been allocated. So I hope the magic happens and you get sent into the right group. I'll be on hand, as will Jane, to manage any questions you've got. If you could use the chat during the session, that would be really good. I think actually, Jane, if you could just move to the next slide, that would be good. Or whoever. Thank you. Bit of housekeeping first. So we'll keep you on mute. So if you've got questions during any of the presentations, could you use the chat function? That will also mean that we can collect your questions if we don't get around to answering them during the afternoon, because as I said, it's a really kind of action-packed programme. So we may well have more questions than we can answer in the tight time available, but there will be a report afterwards, which sort of does a "you said, we did" Q&A type thing. All the questions, all the presentations are being filmed as well. So if you want to go back to them afterwards and watch them on demand, you're very welcome to do so. It will be really helpful for us, if we are answering questions, for you to identify yourself with your real name. Sometimes that doesn't come up on Zoom. So if you hover over your profile, there are 3 little dots. If you press on those 3 little dots, you can actually change your Zoom name to your actual name. That will be very helpful for the Q&A process. Obviously, we do welcome discussion. I say, because it's quite a tight time frame, it could be tricky to have lots of discussion. I would also remind you, because we're now into the PERDA period before the local elections, if there's anybody here from any of the from any candidates, for example, clearly this is not a forum for discussing any political topics, so please bear in mind the PERDA issue. And finally, do use the chat. We really want your questions. Obviously, there will be an opportunity for discussion during your breakout groups, but have a great afternoon, and I hope that you have a really interesting time. We've got some really good speakers, some top-notch speakers, and the discussion groups will be really good. So enjoy, and I'll catch up with you later. Now we're going to hand over to Janet, who will be speaking to us about what's happened since we were last together. Thank you, Janet.
Okay, thank you, Paul. So it's my pleasure just to have a very few minutes with you to share what's been happening since we were last together. And for those of you who will be shocked as I was, that was last October, 1st of October last year, and that seems a lifetime ago. But just before I recap on what we've been doing, thought it might be useful just to recap very briefly on the ICP. So the Integrated Care Partnership is essentially a collaboration, a partnership, or a network, if you will, of commissioners, providers, local authorities and other organisations, including the third and voluntary sector. We're working together so that we can make sure that health, social and care services are joined across our geography, covering Broxtowe, Gedling, Rushcliffe and Hucknall. And overall, you can see there on that slide, the aim is to support people in South Nottinghamshire to live healthier lives, to get the right treatment that they need at the right time. And I don't think we need reminding that, especially at this difficult time during the pandemic, that to live our best and healthiest lives is absolutely crucial. So in that sense, health is really the new wealth for everyone. I'm not forgetting on that final point that care and services are needed across a whole range of settings, from the formal settings right through to people's own homes. So that's just a quick reminder. So then moving on to the next slide, I said I'd just share briefly what we've been doing. Top of the list, we were requested and it was suggested that we needed to engage much more with the community. and also for local people to have a chance to influence decision making. So what's been happening is that there are now community development forums in each of the localities, so North and East, Northwest and Rushcliffe, and they are now meeting monthly. And these forums will start to feed into the ICP board and in turn influence the decisions that are made there. So moving on to the next slide, community hubs. This was another strong message that came through, people wanting to see these hubs based in local communities with shared services in each locality. And this in fact is happening now, working and doing that work with district and borough councils. And the ICP partnership includes 4 local authorities, and we work very closely with the colleagues in each of those organisations. Particularly to highlight, there is one neighbourhood group working with Broxtowe to plan the hub. That's in development now, and we're going to keep a watching brief on that one as it develops, as it might well become a model of good practice as we roll out this work. And then just the final thing to end on, community voices. From the last event in October, I think some of the feedback was that colleagues wanted to allocate time for a live Q&A session and to have a better focus on key issues. And what we've done in terms of this session, as Paul mentioned earlier, there is a Q&A session that we've built into the afternoon, and this whole event, as you can see, focuses on the key priority of mental health transformation. And last point there, we've even managed to build in a video case study that Tony's been busy putting together. So I don't want to go over my time, so I'll stop there and hand back to Chairman. Thanks, Paul.
That's great. I really appreciate good timekeeping on a packed agenda like today. Thank you, Janet. So now we're delighted to have John Bruin, who's the Chief Executive of Notts Healthcare Foundation Trust. So Notts Healthcare provides the mental health services and the community services across the county of Nottinghamshire. John, you're going to give us a bit of an overview of the ICP.
I think John might be struggling. Oh.
Can you hear me?
Hello, John. How are you?
Can you see me?
I can hear you. Yeah, there you are.
Oh, right. Apologies, everybody. I've literally spent the last 12 minutes panicking because I couldn't log on. My computer said no. But through the good offices of the people that's run this session, I managed to get in just in time. Hence, I'm a little bit flustered because I'm not. But good afternoon. You're very, very welcome. My name is John Bruin. I'm the Chief Executive of Nottinghamshire Healthcare NHS Trust. It's really nice to see so many people joining us today. I haven't got lots and lots to say, largely because there's a fantastic agenda ahead of us. But I just wanted to say a couple of words about the importance of meetings like this and making sure that we continue to talk with and listen to as many people within our communities as possible to help inform us about how we can continue to improve and make services better. I know sometimes that sound like a bit sort of like weary rhetoric and doesn't happen, but the fact that we've got so many here, this is the second of these big meetings, it's something we're going to continue to do in the future, because people that live in communities are really important allies in helping us improve and get things right. And it's a continuous process of learning and improving. I'm obviously really passionate about mental health and learning disability services. Our organisation is a large employer. We see thousands of patients every year. But it's really important for people like me and for people that work for the Trust is that at the end of the day, we are a specialist provider, and that means that the vast majority of people that need help with mental health, community provision receive it locally, and they receive it from different organisations, whether they be carers, volunteers, community groups, primary care, GP, all those people, all those communities with expertise. It's really important that we stay connected. And over recent years, one of the main critiques or criticisms of health services that have become a bit too disjointed, and can be very difficult for people on the receiving end of services to navigate their way through. So that one of the main objectives of these integrated care partnerships, these ICPs, is to start to break down some of those barriers and start to help it become easier for people to get access, to see the right person at the right time, as close to home as possible. Because the sooner you can do that, the better it is for everybody. So by way of introduction, really, that's as much as I wanted to say, Paul. It's really nice to see you again, by the way.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
It's been many years, yeah.
I won't say anything about your new hairstyle since I last saw you.
Well, I'll return the compliment by saying yours looks impressive. But no, thank you very much for asking me to come. Looking forward to a really good presentation and conversation. I'm going to hand back to you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, John. Okay, and now we've got Kezia Foster. So if we could have the slides back up. Kezia is going to talk to us about transformation, not just of mental health, but I think actually transformation of sort of end-to-end pathways. So not just in the specialist mental health services, but sort of right across the sort of ICPs, different range of providers. So Kezia, you're very welcome, and we're really looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you, and hi everybody. My name's Kezia Foster and I'm the Head of Transformation for Nottinghamshire Healthcare Trust Mental Health Services. But as Paul says, I'm going to talk a little bit broader about that. I want to talk to you today about the mental health long-term plan. Some of you will be aware of it, some of you maybe not so much. A couple of years ago, the plan was launched, and it built on the 5-year forward view that was launched in 2016 to really look at mental health services and how they can be developed, and set some really ambitious standards for us that we were all really happy about in terms of from a transformation point of view. So the long-term plan covers specialist services, things like perinatal mental health, children and young people's mental health, adult community illness through from IAPT, so improving access to psychological therapists, right through to the severe mental illness pathway that you'd know as secondary care. It's got the crisis care element in there, wants to improve therapeutic inpatient care, and then obviously focuses on that suicide reduction and bereavement support. So it is a huge profile of service transformation and ambition. The 5-year forward view set out some of the standards. The key turn really for the long-term plan was that it also came with quite a significant amount of investment to support this. And I think historically, mental health services have tried to do lots of things with quite limited resources, and I think that was recognised. So when the long-term plan was launched a couple of years ago, there was also a funding, a transformation plan that went alongside it, and that's what we've been working through and working towards. Can I have the next slide, please? I'm going to focus on, for the next few slides, the severe mental illness pathway, and that's because it's the most established. I am going to touch on the other ones, but please don't think that I'm skipping past them. It's just that we've got a very limited time to do this. And really the community one, the severe mental illness one, touches most of the services that I'm going to talk about, and it's about getting the core right. So alongside the long-term plan, there was a community mental health framework that was launched from a national point of view, and it set out the ambition that we were going to develop more inclusive community-based offers. We were going to move away from secondary care, primary care, and develop truly integrated pathways of care. And within that, we'd focus on specific areas that historically probably haven't had the focus that's been required. So things such as personality disorder, adult eating disorders, and those that need longer term community-based rehabilitation needs. Where it stands out from other plans is it recognises absolutely that and John alluded to this earlier, that we are kind of on the periphery of people's care. We're specialists, and the vast majority of people get the support throughout their communities. And, you know, this diagram sets it out really nicely. The person in the middle, surrounded by lots of different things from work, families, and you can see acute mental health is right on the edge of that care. And through that, we should be connecting it. So that's the ambition, and that's what's being set out for us. So within that, there's access targets. So the way that we'll be kind of monitored on this is the number of people that are accessing integrated pathways of care. They'll also look at the number of people that receive physical health checks that are on the severe mental illness pathway. Individual placement support is all around employment and supporting people that have been within these pathways back into the workplace or training. And then early intervention in psychosis is a standard that's been around for quite a while, and this is about developing the quality elements of that as well. So really key that people, when they require that specialist input, they get that on a really timely basis, and it's all about evidence-based pathways within that. Now, it doesn't talk about integrated care partnerships, it talks about primary care networks in place. And that's really important for us to understand your need on a local level and what the primary care networks footprint needs. And it talks about the services wrapping around those primary care networks and really understanding their populations. Can I have the next slide, please? So just to build on how we've done this so far from a collaborative point of view, and I'll talk about what we want to do next. So it's not all brand new. We looked at the ICS mental health strategy that I think Paul mentioned at the beginning of this call. So all of this builds on the feedback that we got through the mental health strategy that was developed. It aligns really well with what the long-term plan tells us to do. These are quite they're things that have been around for a long time. But what you'll hear throughout this is the way that we will look to have a no wrong door kind of approach to stop people from bouncing through services, and that we work with people and facilitate their move to the next level or step of care, whatever that might be. So through the mental health strategy development, you can see that we engaged with lots of different people. But we've also developed a service user group to really form locally what these services look like on a more local level, and we'd love people to put themselves forward to be involved in that. Can I have the next slide, please? So key models that we're moving towards, as I said, no wrong door, very person-centered, and around strength-based and self-management. So really building on those broader indicators or support networks that really keep people well, and that we support that. That for our approach, we want a multi-agency, a multi-organisation, but one team approach, so that people don't feel that, you know, you're being handed off to multiple organisations. And we're starting to do that with working with different organisations having honorary contracts and people actually coming in and working within our teams, but we don't need to employ everybody. A big thing that lots of people tell us is they don't like not having a named key worker. And throughout their care. So big ambition within the plan is that everyone should get a named key worker, and that trusted assessor models work so that you're not having to do multiple assessments and be referred through a specific. So for example, to get into a certain team, you must go through a GP. We need to move away from that kind of practice. As I mentioned earlier, that wrap around the primary care networks. And a real key move this year is that there'll be mental health practitioners embedded within each PCN. And they're being described as the bridge to start to really form those relationships and to develop that care. So the pathway around being more integrated, but developing, I know you've talked about community hubs on this, and developing a mental health type hub that has all these organisations, social care, employment, VCSE, that are easily accessible as part of somebody's pathway. A big push is around the evidence-based care pathways and that kind of trauma-informed support. One of the key areas, so if you're in primary care and you require CBT, you'd go through the IAP services. In secondary care, you've probably got a longer wait to access cognitive behavioural therapy. It's a bit in that the inequity is there. So one of the focuses is around improving the access to psychological therapies within those specialist services to make sure that we kind of realign that. And then a real focus on the evidence base for supporting people with personality disorder better, and how that might be done differently rather than the kind of very medicalised model that sometimes we offer. Can I have the next slide, please? So when we've gone out and spoke to people about how this works, so we've talked about wrapping around the person, which is absolutely right, and making sure the needs are. But more than that, we are specialist services, and we hold a lot of information and skills. And a lot of people, particularly the VCSE groups, will talk to us about people maybe not wanting to be referred into services, or that actually they don't feel as though they quite need to refer in, but they want some support about how they might better care for the individual and how they might better offer that support. So within this, we want to build in that, you know, other health professionals, other professionals that are working with people are able to access support and advice about how they might improve their care. And also looking at shared training opportunities. So really how the specialist services wrap around that infrastructure rather than every patient having to be seen as part of that. So a more consultative role. I'll just mention this here. So, and you'll see the growth in workforce that I'm going to talk about in a minute. And the question everyone asks me is, can you really recruit to all these posts? It's a real, it's not just about more clinical posts. This is about growing peer support worker posts that pharmacy posts, so more, you know, OTs that are mental health focused. So a real kind of broad spectrum of skill mix within this is where we're working towards. Next slide, please. So the growth in access, just to give you an idea, so this is across the ICS area. County South are around a third of this. So by 23-24, the way that they've set this out is that around 7,000 people, at least 7,000 people, will be accessing what they call a truly integrated pathway of care. What we'd like to do is we'd like to work much more with our partners to offer the pathway on a more equal footing, and that by us going out and working with more organisations, that more people are supported outside clinical services through that improved partnership working and a more skilled workforce within the services. Next slide, please. Just in terms of working towards that, so even through the pandemic, we continued with some of the transformation. So we've ran 2 very successful pilots, one with Nottinghamshire Mind and one with Turning Point, to look at how we might work differently with the VCS. We're looking to expand that over the coming months, and we're working with our procurement teams to go out and start to look at market engagement events. But we really see the role of the VCS as a key element of the growth in this transformation, and their community services. They understand their areas better than probably most. So we're really keen to do that. And then obviously the social prescribing roles that have been developed specifically around mental health, we see those as a real benefit. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to finalise this element and I'll move on to a couple of the other points. But I like this slide, and it's what came with the community framework, and it describes what people experience now with severe mental illness. So the siloed care, the cliff edge care between the 2 secondary and primary care services, long waits, rejected referrals, minimal meaningful care contacts, so people treated as risk entities, and that tends to happen when there's tight capacity and, you know, the resources are finite. You would have to risk manage. And then it talks about what people should experience by 23-24, so that removal of arbitrary exclusion criterias, shorter waiting times. So there's currently pilots that are testing out a 4-week wait, which is quite a significant change to what people experience now. And that they would experience that stepping up and stepping down more fluidly and flexibly, and a more personalised care approach. But I think it sums it up quite nicely in terms of trying to explain the experience, and what we'd hope is when we listen to people when we go out around the mental health strategy, is this is what people would ask for. Can I have the next slide, please? So in terms of crisis care, so they are a community service, but they do sit slightly differently to the community teams. Crisis has been developing over the past year or so, and core fidelity levels, that's just a quality standard that crisis teams are measured on. So now, you know, we're working towards having the kind of quality standard crisis teams that you need to serve the population. We've developed the 24/7 self-referral line into the crisis team, and that's being further developed with Turning Point to put more call handlers in there. Crisis sanctuaries have been launched across the county, working with 4 different VCS partners, and they're growing during this year. The street triage service has been expanded to the day car, and we've also included a multi-agency worker within there. So where we're finding that people are using or being picked up by the street triage team on a regular basis, there's a dedicated worker that will go and work with different agencies and do a bit of coordination and work with some of those key partners. Mental health services for older people, we've developed their home treatment team so that they're more responsive for older people that are in that crisis phase. And then over the next 6 months, as I've developed, that will grow further, particularly the offer of the crisis sanctuary, and also looking at what post-crisis support we might be able to develop and work with the voluntary sector. Next slide, please. Children and young people. So I've talked a lot about the severe mental illness pathway, and that started about 2 years ago. So the long-term plan's been phased, and we went through a period that was called Stabilise and Bolster for the adult teams. What they recognised is those teams were running hot. They had long waits, and actually to get them into a position where they could transform, they needed to be brought up to a certain level. The community, the children and young people's element is probably at a similar place now, where we've developed a kind of an investment profile for community CAMHS teams, recognising that, you know, there are weights that are growing and those teams are becoming more pressured. Some of the things we have done over the past few months are the crisis offers being expanded to 24/7. That services the self-referral line. So, and that will grow to the similar quality levels that I mentioned in the adult pathway over the next year. We've launched something called Silver Cloud, which is an online offer for children that are engaging in therapeutic pathways, and that kind of enhances the therapeutic offer and offers some interventions while they might be waiting for a kind of face-to-face intervention. A real good success is the introduction of the mental health support teams in schools, and obviously Gedling and Rushcliffe, I think we were the first amongst the country to launch that, so that's been really positive, and they're coming in waves, so they're expanding all the time. As I said, over the next few months, there's a transformation programme board that's been established to develop children and young people's services, particularly community services and perinatal services. Just on this page, I think it just got slotted in, just to make you aware as well that we've also developed the ADHD and ASD services. That a new model's been launched, started on the 1st of April. So far we're getting really positive feedback. They're still in that development phase, but it's more equitable. City had a different service to the rest of the county, but that means that people can get improved access to assessment and post-diagnostic support for ADHD and ASD. That's for adults. Can I have the next slide, please? I'll just touch on dementia quickly. So, you know, the aim is that we continue to achieve the 66% diagnosis rate. NOTS does do that, but there's been quite significant waits for memory assessment services in the past. These are reducing quite quickly now. There's quite a significant amount of investment that's gone into memory assessment services, both to offer a more timely assessment, but also in terms of the multidisciplinary offer. So you've got more offer of different skills to support you through that dementia assessment. And what we hope is that gives a better kind of options for post-diagnostic support. We're just in the process of reviewing the day services with commissioners and looking at how we can improve that post-diagnostic support offer. And we're also working with commissioners around the discharge to assess pathway for people with dementia to make sure that they're not ruled out of that kind of option as a discharge option if we can offer more support for those people with cognitive difficulties. Next slide, please. Finally, I think so this is learning disabilities. So it's a continued move towards moving away from bed-based care for people with learning disabilities, and that people will be offered that personalised approach, but also bolster the community services so that we don't rely on putting people into inpatient care. What we know is that it takes much longer to turn them around and bring them back out. So by increasing adult crisis support and also making sure that they've got that bolstered key worker, so that there's a more improved tracking of the individuals. And then the annual health check uptake as well, the access rates grow for that. Next slide, please. Oh, I think that's me. So I'll stop there, and I'm very happy to take questions or however you want to run, Paul.
Yeah, if anybody's got any questions, we've got a couple of minutes before we move into our video. So happy to take a couple of minutes worth of questions if anybody's got anything they'd like to ask Kezia. There is a question actually from Alison, which says, is Silver Cloud available to anyone or just to referred children?
At the minute, it would be anybody that was referred into CAMHS, but you can self-refer it into CAMHS. I can pick that up, Alison, with the team to see whether there's a different way, but at the minute, because it needs to be, the way Silver Cloud works is there's a therapist that works with you with it. It's not just self, you need a therapist allocated to you as well, is my understanding.
Okay, thank you. And I got a question from Gilly Hagan, who I think wants to ask it in person. So Gilly, if you could mute yourself.
Paul, right, I've got it, Paul. Yes, after the assessment, the issue I have is what follows then with dementia patients. It seems that there's no sort of direct link at times. It's quite varied as to what happens with the individual patients and carers. And I just wondered if there's any sort of leaflets or any information to follow on from that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a pathway now, but as I mentioned, I think they're reviewing the post-diagnostic support because I think it is a little bit different across different parts of the area, depending on how it's being commissioned. I can certainly get the information for you, but
lovely.
Some commissioners in, but this year there's currently a review of the post-diagnostic support underway because I think that they've realised that there's more to do there.
Lovely, thank you. We've had a few more responses about the Silver Cloud and the IAPT. So Maria Crowley says, in IAPT services, you can access Silver Cloud as well through IAPT. Alex Julian says Silver Cloud is available to, is also available for those referred to IAPT, so same thing. And then Helen Miller says Silver Cloud is available entirely online or with support. So just checking those things are all accurate.
Yes, the CAMHS one, we do have the therapists that work with them.
Yeah. Okay. Are there any more questions for Kezia? Because if not, we will do the rare thing and move on to the next item ahead of time, giving us more time for discussion.
I have put my hand up, Paul. It's Kinsey.
Sorry. Hello, Kinsey. How are you? You've got 3 minutes.
3 minutes. Oh gosh, yeah. Hi, everybody. Thank you very much, Casey. Good to see you again. It's Kinsey from Health Watch Nottingham and Nottinghamshire. And it just, I think this applies to all the services you have discussed, Casey, and I appreciate that. I'm wearing my Health Watch hat. But I kind of feel like, are we a little bit at risk of, because, you know, the word transformation implies a significant and marked change from A to B, which is charged and felt by the person who's receiving the services. So I do feel sometimes we could get those big words and we say, then we kind of talking to ourselves and maybe they can lose meaning. What do I actually mean by transformation? Because I think the best charge, whether that is a transformative service or stage, is the people who are receiving these services. And I'm a bit worried that we might just be getting caught up in the words and not monitoring and kind of being able to evidence it in a measurable way, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's actually called the community mental health transformation, and that's all the bits that we have to put in. And I think you're right with the language. What I would say is that in all of the working that we've done to develop this, and the national team, the scrutiny that we have to go to when we put these plans together, is that they want to see a fundamental change to the way that mental health services are delivered, and that those things that people have told us for many years about not being joined up, having to have multiple assessments, is that we will have to demonstrate that. There are key metrics that are coming through now that will really start to challenge. It won't just be about how quickly you get an assessment. I think it's more about what that assessment consists of, and then also how long it is before you start to access the help that you think you need. You know, when does somebody feel as though they've accessed the support that they think they need? That the language is changing quite significantly on this. It is very ambitious. I'm not going to beat around the bush. It's kind of where we are, but it's the language that's being used through all the policy documents, through all of the guidance, that we have to demonstrate that we're doing something quite different within this. I do just want to say this is a 3-year program, so you know it won't happen overnight. We want to work with local areas, and as the money, because the money is released on a 3-year basis as well, so as it grows we need to make sure it's growing in the right areas. And just one final plea: if people are interested in being part of the service user and carer development group to make sure that these plans are on track, please do email me, and I'll make sure that you're kind of put into those groups.
Yeah, that would be great. And in fact, if you'd like to put that in chat, then Jane can collect your expressions of interest. Thank you very much, Casey. That's really interesting. And I think a really good point actually there, Kinsey, about the language. I guess this strategy was written for the NHS and for the people with the money. Obviously, when we translate it into improving services and using people like us to help to do that and to feed back on them, we've got to use different words, and transformation doesn't really mean anything, does it, to the average person in South Nottinghamshire? So I think that's a very well made point. Okay, so next, Jane, I think we've got a fantastic video which I watched last night while I was cooking tea, and I had to stop cooking because it was so captivating. So I don't know much about this. I know that Tony put it together, but it features some of the local community services and some of the stuff that's sort of not really to do with the NHS whatsoever. It's some of the amazing stuff that's been developed, and I think that encapsulates the partnership working that we're going to develop much more as part of this strategy, this transformation. So without any further ado, let's roll the video.
Yeah, it's a group we set up 2019. Why we decided to set it up was because when my husband was diagnosed, there was not a lot of help anywhere. There was a medical profession help, but nowhere socially and get together and find other people that you could talk to, because talking to the carers or the people with dementia, talking to each other, get a lot out of it, because we fully understand how each other feels. So and then it was the first 4 years was really, really bad for both me and Steve. That's my husband, because we thought it was the beginning of the end. And then we thought, no, you've got to look at it day by day. So then our motto is that we help people to live well with dementia. You can live well with dementia. So that's basically what made me and Steve want to do something. Before the lockdown, we met once a month up at the church hall. And we started off with, I think it was about 8 people. And then as lockdown approached, we ended up with 28 in the group. And the main thing is just because you do get isolated, even from family and friends. I don't think they know how to approach. So we've lost friends and family, and everybody we talk to is the same. So we're just all there to help support each other and pass on information or ideas that might help each other. So it's really, really a self-help group. So it's been very, very hard work, but very rewarding, because we had one lady, took us a while to get her to come, and then she'd been coming for a while, and she just turned around and says, "I've started living again since joining the group." Well, that just was fantastic. That's all we want. And since lockdown, we've been having 3 group meetings a week. We have a coffee afternoon on a Tuesday afternoon. We have a Wednesday craft evening where we supply all the crafts and the projects and things. And then on a Thursday, we have quizzes, music quizzes, jokes, just chatting up, catching up with people, seeing if they're okay. I try to facilitate everything that can happen, but then I try and sit back because it is for the people with dementia, and they decide where they want to go. They decide what they want to do. And unfortunately, a lot of people seem to think they need that taken away, and they can't make these decisions themselves, but they can. There's no reason why they can't.
We've got our own in-house support program, the Mindset program, and that's a very diverse kind of collection of groups, support groups, which are based mainly within the centre in terms of well-being, relaxation, meditation, talking support groups, voice healers groups, all sorts of kind of support groups that happen as a package. And then we also do walks as well. So, and then we're getting into a more physical kind of well-being thing. We've got some funding fairly recently to do that as well. So it's trying to provide us a holistic kind of support as possible, really. People can self-refer, and that's usually available either via a telephone call if they become aware of us, or online as well. We can do it for our website, and all it requires is really just to sort of let us know if someone's struggling, and we can try and engage. So we've got mental health workers here. So staff makeup wise, I was a psychotherapist within the trust and everything else for a couple of decades. So coming into this was a natural thing for me. And we try and keep our referral kind of process as painless as possible, as accessible as possible. So people can just give us a ring or email us. We have 2 mental health workers on site as well. We've got Paul as business development manager. We have another psychotherapist who provides pro bono work, things like this. So we've got, again, quite a package to maybe just do an initial assessment, see where things are at for the individual and what they may find useful in terms of plugging into the service. So there are voluntary opportunities here as well, which is really, really useful for folks on a therapeutic level and invaluable for us as a relatively small staff team. So we have a cafe here, and we have 2 employed members of staff who run that, and we have supporting that lots of volunteers who've had their own maybe lived experience of mental health difficulties, etc. So we've got a really, really vibrant community. Obviously, in terms of COVID, that's been really difficult, but we were able to continue running in a fashion with a duty worker system. So we're able to connect with nearly 300 members we have on our database. And in exceptional circumstances, provide some one-to-one for people at that point as well. But moving out again, we're starting to re-establish a sense of connection with people, because that's been a huge thing.
So Ruth Rice was the pastor of New Life Baptist Church, and she really had the urge to she saw the need for a community group to help support people with varying different sort of isolation and mental health, sort of depression and things. So she decided to get the church behind her, and we didn't have a building, so we rented this space, and she set this place up, and it was genuinely just going to be because she saw the need in our area, but then other churches started coming along and saying to her, "Oh, I like what you're doing, can you help us?" And she's gone on and set up the Renewed Wellbeing charity, which is now a national charity. But the timetable previous, and that we will be going back to, is Monday afternoon we have a mental health support group, Tuesday morning is games morning, and then we have a knit and natter, which is just really sort of embroidery or anything sort of group going on. That's a really in a group. Wednesday morning is a craft morning, and then in the afternoon we have a music group. Again, that's very, very popular. Thursday morning we have creative writing or sign language, and then Thursday afternoon we don't have a group, but we normally go next door and buy a nice cake from Tiffin.
You know, when the person is lonely, you know, it is a good place to come, and it helps you.
Along the way, I discovered that I've got a condition called attachment disorder, which has caused me quite a lot of stress at times because not understanding what was going on, and just coming along and meeting people with different issues, as I found was really helpful to me. In the sense of, yeah, you realise that, well, I've realised that, you know, helping each other is a way that you can help yourself.
One of the things that we decided to do right from the start was have a milkshake bar. So on a Wednesday, obviously not at the moment, but before, and it will continue. We have a milkshake bar, so we have over 100 children come in, and we give away free milkshakes. They're nice milkshakes. We got the recipe from Heroes. they're the proper thing, and they sit round. We have games on the table, so they can just have like half-hour chill. And then on a Monday evening, but 3 till 5, we run a CAP job club. On the Tuesdays, depending, we either have a dinner club or we might do a bike ride. That's weather dependent. And on a Wednesday, we do the milkshake bar.
I'm finding now I'm having a bit more confidence to connect with people and talk to them more.
I was very withdrawn within myself before I came here, and I've seemed to, like, can I say, blossom.
So Hopefully is a local charity, and most of the service users that do come from Hucknall and surrounding areas, and it's a small project that supports people with learning difficulties, and it helps everybody to have a normal active social life with their friends. We do lots of activities, they go out into the community. It's not only helping our service users to go in the community, it allows the community to know our service users, which I think is really, really important. I think it does our service users the world of good to get together, particularly in the times we had. It's really helped their mental health keep buoyant, because they've been able to see the friends, people they've formed relationships with over the years. Hopefully's been running now for over 30 years.
Started by a carer.
Yeah, started by a carer who didn't have somebody within the community, somewhere in the community, to send her son. So, yeah, she started this, and it was in a nice home environment.
First came across Hopefully just after David he's coming up to the end of school and he was going to college, and I've got a friend whose lad was coming here as well. He's a year older than David, and I knew about the project because it's quite up in the local news and people know about the project. So I came and asked if David could come, and he's been coming for nearly 20 years. It's getting him doing stuff. Everyday stuff is what they do here, so he gets more out of doing things with people and learning to take turns and learning to be independent. David has an eating disorder, and he suffered a lot after my mum died about 7 years ago, and the normalness of coming here and doing structured stuff and seeing regular people and just being expected to just get on with stuff, so everything's normalised, helps, and routine, which is very important to David.
We also help to keep their mental health buoyant, because they're seeing their friends, they're getting out every day and doing things that they like doing, and I think that's what's important. It's doing things you like doing with people you like to be with.
Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed that. As I said last night, I was really quite captivated by that because I guess it's very real for many of us, isn't it? It's you can imagine yourself going to those groups, and maybe some of you do go to some of those groups, and the amount of support we get from them. Okay, so now we're at the part of the event where we go into our smaller groups. So you've got a facilitator in your group who will talk you through what you need to be doing for the next 40 or so minutes. The timing of this is that at 25 to 5, we'll have feedback from your group. So you've actually got exactly 40 minutes. I would suggest about 30 minutes for sort of conversation and 5 minutes either end for sort of intros and then for summarizing, because I need 3 key points from your group to put into the chat and 1 key point to share, because we don't have a lot of time for the verbal sharing. So Jane, if you could press your magic button that's into their groups.
Will do. Okay.
I will see you again. Well, I might well visit your group actually, but I'll see you formally at 22:05, I believe.
Okay, I'm just going to open all the rooms now. You just need to click the join button that appears on your screen for you to go into your room, and I will give you a 5-minute call to tell you to wrap up. Okay?
Yeah, that'll be at past.
This isn't a test, by the way. You are coming back in the main room, just to make you. Apologies for that.
Oh, Jane, can you put the slides back up, please?
It's Tony that will need to put the slides up, because Tony's shared. I'll just message her and let her know.
Yeah. I hope you all had a good conversation. I visited all the rooms and I have to say, I was very pleasantly surprised. No fighting, no, good convivial conversations, constructive, no one talking over each other. Is this really Zoom? I thought that was what always happens on Zoom, but no, fantastic. So looking forward to getting some feedback in a moment. Just waiting for the slides to come back up, although we don't actually need the slides. There they are, perfect. Next slide, please. Yep, so it's feedback time. So I'm going to go to Charlotte and Abdul, who are running the disabilities discussion group. Are you there, Charlotte?
Yes.
So who's feeding back?
I can do that, Paul.
Oh, lovely. So just to remind you, if you could put your feedback into the chat, but you've got 2 minutes, Abdul, to summarize your 3 key points. So over to you.
Thank you. So in our group, there were a number of ideas, but we agreed that there are 2 points. I understand we are allowed to give 2 points. Yeah. So one is around co-production, that we feel that it is very important that we have expert service users and carer group and all service development and all those projects we are making, ensuring that it is done which is meaningful. So understanding their needs in terms of time, developing accessible information so that they have full understanding what are we talking about, and so that it is actually meaningful, their involvement. And then we take into account their views, how to do that. And linked with it is obviously feedbacks on services which already we are doing. So what is already happening, but also what can be developed further. So individual level, but also as a group level feedback and from service users and carers. And linked with this is making sure that accessible information is developed for them, and also keeping in mind that world has changed a little bit post-pandemic, and use of technology need to be considered, how it can create barriers, but also opportunities. So this is linked with the first point. Second point is that mental health practitioners who are embedded in hubs, we need to ensure that they get specialist training and they have those skill sets which can meet needs of people with ID. So, so they understand fully that mental illness model is different. I will not go in detail, but that in terms of specialist skills, we discuss various aspects that they are fully aware, so that they understand how it needs to be done differently and what is the importance of infrastructure to provide services in community, and they have awareness of those community services, and aware that that bed-based model, which has unfortunately for people with ID has been used over years, we are moving away. So what is the infrastructure available in community? What are we developing? And they have those specialist skill sets which where they can engage people with ID and hopefully prevent admissions in hospital and help with that.
Thank you very much, Abdul.
Charlotte, sorry.
I just need to check that all of your responses are also in the chat, because we're going to compile all of the, obviously we haven't got time to verbalize absolutely everything, but if your key points are written in the chat, then that can go into the summary report. Okay, I'm going to move now to the two dementia discussion groups. So I know, Ola, you had a few problems getting into your group twice, but I don't know whether you're feeding back or whether Katie's feeding back from your group. So let's go to that group, please.
So I'm happy to feed back. We had a small but perfectly formed group and were ably supported by Katie. So the key points are, whilst it's commendable that the diagnosis rate is at 66%, that's only the beginning of a very difficult journey. And the group felt very strongly that post-diagnostic support needs to be prioritised and properly funded. Our second key point, which was put really strongly, was the importance of supporting carers. Living well with dementia is only possible with the support of carers.
Thank you.
I'll put the rest in the chat.
Brilliant. I like that. And Star, I think you were leading the second dementia group. Are you feeding back or somebody else?
I was indeed. Gwyneth is feeding back.
Okay. Over to you then. Can't hear anything. Are you on mute? Star, are you able to feed back, given that we can't hear anything from your colleague?
Oh, I guess. Okay, I'll feed back some of the points if you can't hear her.
No, we can't. So yeah, could you go ahead?
Oh.
You literally only have got a minute anyway, so
okay, just a minute. Okay.
Just the key point, please.
I think what was what was fed back quite strongly was that we need to ensure that we do not stigmatize and ensure that our community is educated on dementia. I think there was a mention about the dementia friends, so we should go back to that. That was mentioned, and also they also were more about the proactiveness of our society. We need to be a bit more proactive, even clinically, and show people that people wait well. Although there is a high waiting list, we need to make sure that people are wait well and they are given the right advice even before diagnosis. So pre-diagnosis, we should be active in that particular area before people get that formal diagnosis. Like if we look at the video right at the beginning, where the lady said they almost like did not know what to do. They felt the world was coming to an end. But at that particular point, what could we have done for them before the formal diagnosis? And the other theme was about communication, ensuring that we communicate about dementia and are open about it, albeit it is digital, using newsletters, and ensure that we put things in community magazines talking about dementia. So we desensitize people about it, including young people.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going
sorry,
to move
Star, I've just come back. Sorry.
Can we move to the next group, which is the Children and Young People's group? There were two groups there, facilitated by Vicky and Julie. Could we keep the feedback verbally to 1 minute each? So Vicky first.
Yeah, no problems. I've tapped our 3 points into the chat, but the main kind of burning theme that came out from us was around involving young people in decision making in order to get successful services that they're going to engage with, and services that are going to be delivered in the right place and in an accessible manner for children and young people. So we talked about good practice looking like using young people kind of as role models, training them up, and the importance of lived experience, and kind of seeing young people as experts in their own mental health.
That's great. Thank you so much. Julie.
Yeah, we very much went down the route of that early identification is a real key. And we would really like a system in place where there's really a clear system with key workers, and we recognise that teachers and educators are the real key for this for our young people. And we wanted a more coordinated approach, and as just been said, we wanted to use a proper range of agencies, but really make the most of our community venues and our community assets, and especially open up schools and what's available for our children and young people to support them.
That's great. Lovely. Thank you so much. So now finally, last but by no means least, we have the 4 groups who were looking at adult mental health. So group 1, Matt, I think you were leading that one with Kate. So I don't know who's feeding back. I've seen you put things in the chat. So give key points. You've got 1 minute.
Kate can come in if she wants to. There's so much out there in terms of services, groups and volunteer-led services in the community, so many assets. How do we stabilise and bolster those which might have become vulnerable during the pandemic? Lots of chat about how people get introduced into those groups and services so that they feel confident to really make the most of those opportunities. And lots of enthusiasm for the warm transfers, just mirroring what's happened at other parts of the country so people don't have to keep bouncing around and telling their stories over and over. Those, I think, were the key points, but a very rich discussion and hard to summarise.
Fantastic. Thank you, Matt. Okay, moving to group 2, Andy and Jane. Don't know who's feeding back from your group.
Yeah, it's Andy here. I'm happy to feed back. Yeah, the main issue for us was about access, and in many different forms, and the desire to move away from the GP being the funnel, if you like, at the moment, and that hindering access to services was a key point. But while we noted digital therapies and digital access has been helpful, we also noted that digital poverty and there's digital exclusion as well, and that needed to be addressed.
Yeah.
And also about accessing for the groups that have been seldom heard groups, BAME groups, care leavers, ex-offenders leaving prison, and also, and finally, really just about crisis. When people perceive themselves in a crisis, having access and a swift response, to that crisis phone call, we saw as essential for people. So that's the main items from that group.
Thank you very much. Brilliant, Andy. Thank you. Group 3, that's Joe and Richard. Joe, are you feeding back?
I thought we were group 4. Actually, I've put group 4 in the chat.
Okay,
sorry,
group 4, whatever.
Louise is going to feed back.
Oh, lovely. Thank you.
I'll try and do this in 1 minute. We had a very rich discussion as well.
Yeah.
But very similar themes to what's been discussed. So around maintaining connectivity, we discussed around the issues of COVID, and while digital opportunities have brought people together, there's also an exclusion with that as well. Some people have been very excluded because they've not got that ability from a digital perspective. So we need to think about innovative ways forward of involving people in services and sort of having different involvement opportunities. The importance of access came up as well, and it being locality based, because people don't want to travel a long way to access services and are very keen to sort of have it local. And we also talked about opportunities for BAME in relation to access as well, and shared learning between voluntary sector. So being able to share what's worked really, really well, and how can we spread that, and some of the challenges that people have had and how they've overcome them. So they were our 3 main points.
Brilliant, thank you so much. So Maria's group, last but by no means least, you have 1 minute.
Oh, fantastic. So it's me feeding back. So we had a really rich conversation around mental health services not really working in a holistic way. So physical health over there, mental health over there, it's commissioned separate and still very much in a silo, even though we've had, you know, lots of government initiatives about prioritising them together. That's still not happening. And the very clear message was we need to listen. We need to ensure that, you know, we see mental health as equal to physical health. And if we are willing to put in, you know, ramps and toilets for people with physical disabilities, then we also need to think about what we may need to do in terms of changing the way we work for people with other issues as well. So that was a real clear that actually as services, as a system, we need to listen more to the patients that use our service.
Brilliant. That is a really, really good point to end on. Thank you so much for that, Maria. Okay, can I have the next slide, please? So we're going to do Q&A now. So even if I don't have, here we go. So let's ask the panel. So I think we've still got Janet, John, Kezia. So if you've got any questions for Janet and John and Kezia, anybody of a certain age will remember Janet and John very well from their school days. I don't know if it's the same too. Probably that's completely got over the heads of 90% of the audience, but if you're over the age of 50, you'll know Janet and John books, I'm sure.
I remember Janet and John.
You remember well. Janet and John books, don't you? So do we have any questions for our panel, please? Oh, John's left, so you won't be able to ask John any questions. So does anybody have any questions for Kezia, or actually for any of the group leaders based on the feedback you've just heard? So if you could put your questions in the chat, that would be great. Thank you. So Julie's got a question here. What plans do you have in place to meet the growing needs for services? Waiting lists are long and support is currently not effective. So who wants to take that one? Is Kezia still here?
Yes, I'm still here.
So as transformation lead, how are you going to address the increasing needs?
Well, I suppose it goes back to what we've talked about right at the beginning. So there is growth in the workforce, that you know, that's a key part of it, but also looking at who can do different parts of that pathway and working better with partners to look at servicing those needs. So I suppose it's about us working together so that we can see more people at that clinical pathway where they're getting their kind of other needs supported jointly with partners. That's the ambition of this. There's a lot of kind of planning and capacity modelling about what might happen if referrals increase due to COVID. And I think we're waiting to see the types of needs that come from that. But I don't think it'll be far away from what the long-term plan sets out now about that more timely access to evidence-based pathways, that increase in the psychologically informed kind of pathways. Also breaking off some of those more specific needs around personality disorder. So for example, things when those patients aren't being managed in the best way, they can take an enormous amount of capacity and resource, and it doesn't work for anybody. So probably working more smartly with people in that more structured clinical management approach. So I think there's multiple plans to do that, but you know, one of the biggest ones is growing our partner organisations with us and working with. So part of the next 3 years is around really developing links with the local infrastructure, so like the wellbeing hubs and the voluntary community sector, to make sure that we're linked in at that level.
Lovely. So I've had a question from Richard. Hang on a minute, they keep shifting because new questions are coming in. Let me just go back up again to Richard's question. Is there going to be funding available to help support those community and voluntary sector organisations that are key to the delivery of support in the community? I know that's been an issue with COVID, because during lockdown, several of these organisations ran out of funding and weren't not been able to carry on.
Yes, yeah. So the transformation funding that's been earmarked includes growth of VCS with it. So it's not an expectation that we find more people and then try and kind of give that to the voluntary community sector without the growth there. So there is investment earmarked for those services that fit with that pathway. I'm conscious that there's quite a few of the commissioners on this call, but the way that we're looking at that is looking at options for how we create those partnership arrangements with the VCS to make sure that we follow the kind of procurement rules. But yeah, in short, there is investment there to grow some of those services.
Okay. And Julie asks another question about crisis calls not being answered, and it seems the teams are sitting with more risk at the moment. So can you talk to us about the capacity within the crisis team to answer calls in a timely manner?
Yeah, so I mentioned this at the beginning that there's been investment to get the teams up to the quality standards. Currently, there are vacancies within those teams, and we've also had issues due to shielding and things due to COVID. We see we're recovering from that, but part of the crisis line capacity will grow. So the plans to merge the Turning Point resource into the crisis line so that there's more capacity to answer that phone, so dedicated call handlers, and also an improved phone system so that people don't have to leave a message. They'll be made aware that they're in a queuing system. So we are working through that and front loading that capacity, because we really don't like the idea of people having to leave answer phone messages. The line was they were implemented very quickly. We were given a week to implement them pre the surge weekend in April last year. So they've been kind of added on, and they should have come into effect this year. So we're just working through that. So what I kind of said in our breakout room as well is we're really keen to hear about the line and the feedback from that. From the 1st of June, we should see an improvement in that, hopefully quite significantly.
Thank you very much, Casey. Thank you for shouldering all the questions. Can we just have the final slide, please, Tony? Thank you. And well, yeah, thank you, actually. Thank you to all of our speakers and to all of our facilitators, and especially to Tony and to Jane. They've put in loads of hard work to get this event to run smoothly and to recruit everybody along. And thank you to you all for participating. I mean, I've been in all of the breakout groups, and I know everybody's had their say. So I hope you've enjoyed the meeting and everything you've contributed, both in the breakout groups and questions. Everything that's been recorded in the chat has been captured. So there will be a report afterwards. And of course, we are going to have regular meetings now that the ICP has sort of really got its mojo and is up and running. So there'll be the video of the session will be available, so you'll be able to watch that again and play it to your family and send it to them for Christmas and all sorts of things. And if you want to get involved in the ICP, the Integrated Care Partnership, please do get in touch. We need the community to pull together for this one. It's not about professionals doing unto us as patients. It's about everybody working together. I think we've got some great examples in those videos of how powerful community organisations can be as being the bedrock of improving mental health and support. So all remains for me to say is have a lovely evening. Enjoy the catch up when you get a copy of the video to watch. There'll be the Q&A document, and keep in touch with us. Here are the various different social media ways of doing it. But we also accept letters if you really want to send us a letter. I hope you've enjoyed the afternoon, and we'll see you again next time.
Well done, Paul. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.